Today we are going to be continuing in our journey through the Gospel according to Mark. We're going to be in Mark chapter 7. If you have your Bibles, of course, that's where we'll be, Mark chapter 7. If you don't, you can use one of the Bibles in the pew in front of you, or you can follow along in the bulletin where we have all of the text printed and an outline there for you to follow along as well. So when you think of traditions, what comes to mind for you? What kind of traditions come to mind when you just hear that word? What's kind of the first thing? I know for me, probably one of my favorites is Thanksgiving. I know it's a holiday, but it's just become a real tradition in our family to do kind of things a certain way. And we've mixed it up some. Some Thanksgivings we've served down at Rowan Helping Ministries, and other times we've just done different things. But for the most part, the main thing that Thanksgiving is about, and what I love about it, is that it's a time that we get to kind of pause, and we get to have our family up, and we have way too much food, really good food. And Angela has instilled a tradition in our home that when the kids get a certain age, they pick a dish they want to learn how to make, to contribute. And so that's kind of fun. Each one of them now has gotten to that point where they all make their own dish to contribute to that Thanksgiving feast. And then, of course, I love the tradition of falling asleep while trying to watch football. But it's a tradition that we've come to love, right? And traditions, they can be such good things, right? Well, today, we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the dangers that come with traditions as well, especially in this first part of our passage. The message for today is it is all about the heart. So we're going to be working, like I said, all the way through Mark 7. We're going to take it in chunks. So the first 13 verses, I'm going to go ahead and start that, and you just follow along as I read. All right, it says, "Now when the Pharisees gathered to him with some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem, they saw that some of his disciples ate with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. For the Pharisees and all the Jews did not eat unless they wash their hands. Unless they wash their hands properly, holding to the traditions of the elders. And when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other traditions that they observe, such as the washing of cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches. And the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, 'Why do your disciples not walk according to the traditions of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?' And he said to them, 'Well did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites. As it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. You leave the commandment of God and hold to the tradition of men.' And he said to them, 'You have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. But you say, if a man tells his father or his mother, whatever you would have gained from me is Corban, that is given to God, then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother, thus making void the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down. And many such things you do.'" Okay, so out of that text, our first point that we're going to see today is that our love for tradition should never replace our love for God. Okay, our love for tradition should never replace our love for God. So we see at the beginning of this passage another delegation of fact-finding theologians, these Pharisees and teachers of the law. They came down from Jerusalem to investigate what this Jesus was all about, right? To see what was going on in all the Galilean activities of Jesus. What they found was appalling to them, right? They found disciples eating with unclean hands. Now, this is not a statement about hygiene, I know there's a lot going around about making sure we are washing our hands as if that's a new thing, right? Oh no, there's a new virus. Make sure you wash your hands. Well, you should have been washing your hands all along. But this isn't a statement about hygiene at all. The question was one of ceremonial purity versus ceremonial defilement. And the amount of water that they actually used to cleanse that with was actually very small. It was all about the ceremony of cleansing themselves. The Jewish leaders of this time had amassed, and actually before this time as well, had amassed a huge compilation of traditional laws because they didn't think there was enough laws, right? The Old Testament didn't have enough laws and enough ceremonial laws, so they decided to make their own list where they felt like, well, the Old Testament was just silent on these, so we'll make some of our own. Now, I say that kind of flippantly, but no doubt they probably had good intentions. It's just not quite clear here, so maybe we should do things this way, but they didn't present it that way, right? These became very important traditional laws. So looking back at verses 3 and 4, Mark explains a little bit about what's going on, right? He says, "For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands." Now, that is a reading in what I normally preach from is the ESV. That's not an endorsement necessarily. I like it, but there's lots of good versions out there. But in this particular case, it actually doesn't do the best job of giving you the understanding of what they're talking about. And actually, in the NIV or the CSB, the Christian Standard Bible, they actually translate it a little more accurate, where it says, instead of just washing their hands, it says, "Do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing." So they're talking about making themselves pure, especially when they've come from the marketplace. Why the marketplace? Well, that's where they would have been interacting with all those Gentiles and all those other Jews that don't really take their faith seriously, the ones that aren't pure, right? So especially when coming from the marketplace, we've got to make sure that we wash up, that we do the ceremonial cleansing before we eat and be unclean. It's funny, though, Jesus never even answers their question, right? He doesn't even try to answer it. Instead, he calls them hypocrites, which can kind of be translated play actors. You're just pretending to be holy and righteous people. These were the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, and he calls them hypocrites. And then he drops this quote from Isaiah on them, which could not be more to the point. Right? He scolds them for their zealous love for their traditions over the commands of God. It's not that all traditions are bad. Not all traditions are bad. But what's behind the traditions, and where do the traditions fall in importance compared to the commands of God? Well, he then gives them this very real example of how they're going astray and how they're doing this. And he uses one of the 10 commandments to do that, right? Honor your father and your mother. This is a very important command. All of the commandments are important, right? So he says, basically, you use the gift of the korban, which is basically it's a gift that they came up with to give to the temple, basically. Kind of to give to the temple pretty much all that you had. And it was something that was encouraged kind of as like a spiritual blessing if you gave more. Again, not found in the law. This was more of a traditional law that they had brought up. So literally, they're encouraging people to give this to this korban, this gift to God. It's a gift to God. I mean, that's a good thing, right? And what Jesus is pointing out is, you do that, and you're making these people poor, basically, so that they cannot even take care of their mother and father. In the name of God, you have created a tradition that is not allowing the people of God to honor their mother and father. This is a problem, right? It was commandment versus tradition, and tradition had won out. It had won the day. And then he says, and many such things you do. Like, this is just one example. just a taste of what you do, right? He says this is exactly what you are guilty of. They're guilty of putting their traditions above the commandments of God. So the question for us then is, are we guilty of this? Right? Do we ever put our traditions ahead of the commandments of God or how God's leading us? What's more important, that we hold fast to those traditions in the name of, well, we've always done it that way. We've always done Thanksgiving a certain way, but you know what? If God calls us to do something different, it comes way down the list. All those things are put aside, right? What are we doing if we put our traditions ahead of what God is doing? Our love for tradition should never and must never replace our love for God. That's our first point. Now, the second point is in our next text. And the second point is this: our actions reveal our heart condition. Our actions will tell a lot about our heart condition, right? So look into verses 14 through 23. Follow along there. He says, and he called the people to him again. Now he's continuing to teach. There has been no break here. Jesus is still talking kind of to the Pharisees, but really then he turns to the crowds and draws them closer. And he called the people to him again and said to them, hear me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him. But the things that come out of a person are what defile him. And when he had entered the house and left the people, his disciples asked him about the parable. And he said to them, then are you also without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart, but his stomach, and is expelled? Thus he declared all foods clean. And he said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. Okay, so without missing a beat, Jesus turns his attention to the crowd, right? Pharisees are still there, still probably waiting for their answer. And he turns to the crowd and calls them to listen to him. He kind of says, while we're talking about the religious leaders who've completely missed the traditions question, he drops this incredible truth on them as well. He says that you can't even be defiled by what you eat. Now, this is a huge statement. It's so huge that they pretty much miss it. We can kind of tell that from their reaction. And actually, the statement that's found in there, thus he declared all foods clean, that's a clear insertion from Mark, who's putting this gospel together. And he's doing it from a perspective of looking back with understanding. So we realize that in Acts chapter 10, when Peter sees the sheet coming down with all the animals, and God tells him, now don't call anything unclean, that's where they start to really go, wait a minute, are you serious? But Jesus, early while teaching, makes this statement, and he absolutely is declaring at that point that there's nothing that can defile you that goes in through your mouth. It's what comes out. So you know the disciples, of course, it's funny too, he says this and then he goes into the house pretty much. So he drops this huge truth bomb on everybody about nothing that can defile you from what goes into you, in through the mouth. And then he goes and goes away to rest, kind of leaving that to hang out there. So the disciples, they get in there and they say, what do you mean by that, Jesus? Right? They did not fully understand what he had meant. So Jesus clarifies it again, but he really just kind of restates it, right? He says, do you not see? Don't you understand? Whatever goes into a person from the outside cannot defile him. It's not what it's about. It's about what's in the heart. That's what defiles a person. It's the wickedness of our own hearts. And these things that he lists, first of all, it's not an exhaustive list. We can look at these and check them off, right? We think. Actually, we probably can't if we really understand the spirit behind each one of them. But he goes through and he says that these things that come out, that we see, the outward works, these are the things that demonstrate the defiled heart. These are what defile us. Things like evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery. Now, some of you may be looking at these and saying, well, I'm good here. Like, I don't steal. You don't? If you really look at what it means, and we're not talking about, dressing up in black and breaking into somebody's house. It's withholding something from someone that's rightfully theirs. Could be property, could be just payment, could be taxes. Just saying, if it belongs to someone else and you're withholding it, you're guilty of stealing, right? That's theft. What about murder? I don't kill anyone. But Jesus said if you hate anyone, right? If you think of someone and you hate them, then you're guilty of murder, right? It's about the heart. Well, what about adultery? Nah, I'd never done that. Never cheated. No? Never thought about somebody else? Had a thought of lust? Never looked at those images that you know you shouldn't be looking at instead of your wife, instead of your husband? Not guilty of that? Yes. Yes, we are. Coveting, wanting for something so much that it crosses over into sin. On and on and on. Wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. Boy, that last one covers a lot, doesn't it? Foolishness. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. Because of these things, because these things reveal the wickedness and corruptness of our heart. This is why it may be Facebook piffy to say, or it may seem wise to put the t-shirt that says, follow your heart. You'll be okay, follow your heart, right? Just trust your heart. That is horrible advice. Don't trust your heart. Your heart is absolutely fickle. There are times when, yes, when you are thinking about the things of God and you're attuned to the things of God, that out of that heart, yes, good can come. The problem is, just as quickly, pride, lust, sexual immorality, foolishness, all these things can creep in. And then what happens when your heart tells you to follow that? Don't follow your heart. Follow the Word of God. Follow Jesus Christ. That's good advice. Wear that t-shirt. Okay, so looking at our next set of scripture, right? We've seen that traditions can creep up and can become bad things and can compete for our heart's affections, and that should never be. We've seen that our actions can reveal our heart conditions as well. Now we're going to see that our words will reveal our true affections often as well. So our words reveal our true affections. All right, let's look at verses 24 through 30. It says, and from there he arose and went away to to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house and did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden. But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile from Syrophoenicia by birth, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Yes, Lord. Yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And he said to her, "For this statement you may go. You may go your way. The demon has left your daughter." And she went home and found the child lying in bed and the demon gone. Okay, so in the previous section we saw, again, how our actions reveal our heart. In this section, we see how our words can reveal what's in our heart as well. And it's not an accident that we find this particular passage here, because in the last section we see where he's made this grand statement where he's starting to pull back some of the privilege of the Jews, right? The gospel is clearly for everyone. And so right after he's made this statement where he's deeming all foods clean, taking away one of those things, the whole reason that God made that a condition in the first place, those things were all to set Israel apart. It's not because any food that they ate would have ever defiled them. It was just to set them apart from other people. So he started already to pull that one back, right? To take that away from the Jews as setting them apart. And here, he takes time out of his teaching to go to a Gentile-heavy country. He goes there and he meets a woman. It says that he's going there to pull away, to be there quietly, but we're seeing that that's becoming nearly impossible for Jesus, right? So there's some discussion whether this happens right after this or maybe Mark put this in. Either way, it doesn't matter, right? Because under inspiration of the Holy Spirit, the Gospel of Mark is put together according to the way that God intended. And so we find this passage which clearly backs up the fact that the gospel is going to the Gentiles. Okay, so in verse 24, we see Jesus leaving the region where he was around the Sea of Galilee, and he goes to this Gentile-heavy region, Tyre and Sidon. Now, it seems he was trying to remain unidentified, but again, that's just becoming nearly impossible. And immediately upon coming there, a woman who was identified as a Gentile, right, from what would be modern-day Syria, she comes up to him. Okay, she comes up to him and falls down at his feet. Okay, this is a mother with a very sick child. Okay, this is a woman who has seen her child possessed by a demon, and she is probably at her wit's end, right? I don't know if you've ever experienced something that would be so frustrating when you have a sick child and you don't know what to do, but it can be very frustrating. And when we had our first child, Grayson, it was our first child. We didn't know what we were doing, and all of our first three had blood incompatibility jaundice. So it was pretty serious. It was more than regular jaundice. And the hospital, somehow, some fluke, they goofed up, and they sent us home with it's called bilirubin counts, which were rising, and that indicates the jaundice levels. And they were going up. And they told us early on when she had it, well, when they get up to around 2021, that's where you're worried about brain damage. Okay, so they're down here around 10, 11. We get home, we're there a day or two, she's not eating much, and those counts keep going up because we have to take her in for the tests. And so we're like, okay, the counts keep going up. We're sleep deprived as more time goes by. She's not eating and losing weight. The doctors say, oh, yes, that's a side effect of the jaundice. She's lethargic. She doesn't want to eat. Okay, well, what's the best thing for that? Well, she needs to eat. Okay, well, how do we get her to eat? Well, she needs to wake up, but she's sleeping. Well, yeah, that's a side effect of the jaundice. Are you kidding me? What are we supposed to do? And her bilirubin count is going up and up and up. And so we went to the pediatrician one last time, and we won't get into everything that happened there. It wasn't bad. We were really tired, and they come in and they say, here's a bottle. Put it in her mouth. She takes 2 sucks. They leave. Like, okay, when she's done with that, you're good. She goes back to sleep. They came back in with new people and said, oh, why, y'all were supposed to have already gone home. And my wife, her face changed. and it was for the right reasons. She's a very gentle person. But this is a mama that was tired, and we were not leaving, and we did not leave until we got help. And thankfully, she woke up and started eating relentlessly. And now she's there, and she's healthy, and she's in college, and all that good stuff, right? But to relate to this woman who has a child that is possessed, and imagine the hope that ignites when she looks up and she sees the miracle worker is here. He's come to my village. So she runs to him, right? And she falls down at his feet. And she asks and pleads with him to please cast the demon out of her daughter. And Jesus' response kind of took me by surprise when I read through this, right? He says, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." And when you really break down what that's saying, is basically he's saying, let the children, the people of Israel, eat first. For it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs, the Gentiles. That doesn't sound very kind, right? But what's going on here, first of all, the words are not as harsh. Actually, the reference to the dog is not like the wild dogs on the street. It's to like the household pet, the puppy that everybody loves, that's part of the family. Still kind of falls short of where I would want it to be, but I'm not Jesus, and I'm not claiming to be wiser than him. But what you have to do in this particular passage is look at the main story. What is he getting at? He's getting at the fact that he's here. And all through the gospel and all through the Bible, we know that the salvation belongs to the Jews first, right? It comes to the Jews first. Yes, it's for the Gentiles as well, but it comes to the Jews first, and that's what he's pointing out to her. Okay? Her response, though, is incredible, right? She says, "Yes, Lord." She's not offended. She knows that she's a Gentile. She understands enough to know that salvation belongs to the Jews first. She says, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Just that heart of faith. You hear the words that come out of her mouth that indicate she understands who Jesus is. She understands that his words are not rude, uncompassionate. She knows the Savior, and her words indicate that. A heart of love for him. And so she says, "Yes, of course, but even the dogs under the table can get the crumbs." And Jesus says, because of that statement, your daughter is well. She's good. And she gets home and finds that her child is now healed. Okay? It was the words that came out of her mouth indicate her right understanding of who God is. So we've seen that like our traditions can indicate, and our love for traditions, or if we have them in the right perspective, how they can indicate our heart for God. We've seen how our actions absolutely reveal our heart condition, and our words can reveal our true affections, and they should reveal our true affections. Next, we're going to see that Jesus, right? Jesus' actions and his words reveal his heart. Jesus' actions and words reveal his heart. Looking at verses 31 through 37. It says, "Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment. And they begged him to lay his hands on him. And taking him aside from the crowd privately, he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephphatha. Yeah, that's easy to say. Ephphatha. That is, be opened. And his ears were opened. His tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. And Jesus charged them to tell no one. But the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, He has done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. So Jesus kind of heads back over to the Sea of Galilee, but he doesn't go where he was preaching before. As a matter of fact, he kind of does an end around up above them and comes down on the other side to the Decapolis, which is a Gentile country, a Gentile region. And so he's not going back to where he was. This is still, again, another example of Jesus going to the Gentiles. Well, upon arrival, it doesn't take long for people to start seeking him out. And they bring a man who is both deaf and has a speech impediment and implore Jesus to heal him. And here we get to see both in action and word the heart of our God. So Jesus brings the man into a private location, right? Probably one of the homes that's there. And knowing that the man could not hear him, could Jesus have just said, "You're healed"? Sure. But he kind of goes an extra step. Touch can be very important, a very important show of affection. And so he takes his hands, his fingers, and he touches the man's ears, right? And then he touches the man's tongue. And then Jesus says, "Be opened." And immediately the man was healed. Healed completely, right? Could hear perfectly. Could speak perfectly, which is no small feat. Right? He had a speech impediment, now gone. Speaks perfectly. Kind of like the idea behind the people who had been lame from birth, right? That never had their legs had never known how to walk. He didn't just heal them with the ability and the strength to. He gives them the know-how to, right? Same thing with this guy. Not only does he loose his tongue, it already knows what to do, right? Jesus takes the extra step to touch the man's ears, to touch his tongue, and to tell him to be opened, and he's healed completely. Right? So once again, Jesus charges everyone there, right? This is one area where they continue to kind of fail Jesus. He tells everyone about this great miracle, right? He says, "Don't tell anyone." And what do? They tell everyone. He can't stop them. I mean, I guess physically he's God, right? He could have stopped them if he wanted to, but he tells them, he instructs them, don't tell anyone. And of course, they go out and they tell everyone. Isn't this an interesting dynamic, right? Jesus teaching healing at this time, he tells them, don't go and tell. And they go and tell. And then the last words he gives us is, go and tell. And what do? We don't go and tell. Right? Week after week, we see from God's word that we're to go and tell. And we're not taking a poll or anything. But how many weeks do you come back and hear the same message? This isn't because I or Pastor Stephen has an agenda, right? This is what's coming from the Word of God. We're supposed to go and tell. Over and over again, we're supposed to go and tell. And how many times do you come back and when you hear that preached again, you go, how many people did I tell? How many times did I ask for that opportunity and then follow up by opening my mouth for Jesus? We see in Jesus' actions and his words that it reveals his genuine heart for us, right? The way he loves us. Unfortunately, with our actions and our words, we often reveal our heart as well. It just doesn't often look like his. But we've seen today that our love for tradition should never replace our love for God. Our actions reveal our heart condition. Our words reveal our true affections. And then Jesus' actions and words reveal his heart. Now, we need to ask ourselves some questions. What is the condition of your heart? It's all about the heart. It's not about what you've done. It's not about what's been done to you. It's about your heart for God. And what is the condition of your heart? How does your love for tradition reflect your heart? Again, I love tradition. Tradition should never, ever get in the way of what God is doing. It should never replace our love for God. What are our actions day in and day out? What are our actions? How we treat one another? How we treat the lost? The things that we look at, the things that we spend our time pouring ourselves into. What do our actions reveal about our heart condition? And what do our words? What do our words tell people about our heart condition? About our true affections? Do they build up? Do they exalt Christ? Or would he be embarrassed to hear the words that just came out of your mouth? But our words will reveal our true affections. Do you look more and more like Christ in word, in deed, day in, day out? That's our call. That's our charge. Not to look more and more like me or John MacArthur or fill in the blank of holy person. Do we look more and more like Christ? Do we act more and more like Christ? Do we talk more and more like Christ? Let's follow him with all of our heart. It's all about the heart. Let's pray.